Welcome back to Truck Tech, everyone. This is your host, Alan Adler. This week, we are in Livonia, Michigan, outside Detroit, and we're here at basically Roush Industries, which is the contract manufacturer for Bollinger Motors. Bollinger in September began building its Class 4 electric commercial truck chassis cab here. And basically, we are going to have an opportunity to see a bit of what goes on here 6 weeks into the build. We're with Bryan Chambers, the President and Chief Operating Officer of Bollinger Motors. Bryan, thanks for having us out.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for coming.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Sure. Yeah, it's been a 7-year journey, and I've been in the business for 40 years, automotive, doing different kinds of prototype builds, pilot builds, low volume builds, painting, assembly, actually all over the world, Brazil, North America, Europe. So it's in my blood, and it's passion too.
You've done some pretty interesting things like space shuttles and stuff like that, right?
Yep, Disney rides, space shuttles, Columbia Raytheon, restored the Rosa Parks bus for the Henry Ford Museum, all kinds of cool things.
And none of that is here in this plant, but everything that you've done, they often say that everything you've done leads you to a certain moment. You took over here when Robert Bollinger essentially stepped aside. You know, he founded the company,
Yep.
but you've worked with him and you've talked to him, and ultimately you decided to sort of come in and run this operation for him.
Yeah. Robert let us do our jobs. You know, he hired the right people and let us do what we need to do. And yeah, he knew that automotive was my background, and that was the right decision to make. So I've embraced it, and it's been a long 7 years, but it's been fun.
Well, we're going to get to see a good bit of the plant and some of the things that you are doing here right now. It's obviously low volume, just 6 weeks under your belt, but you are looking at some pretty significant numbers beginning next year, maybe 2,500 vehicles on a single shift and that sort of thing. So we'll spend some time here in the plant. You know, the last time we saw this truck was at the Work Truck Show, and it was a nice, good-looking example of what you're doing. But now you're building them, and you're building them on a contract manufacturer basis here at Roush in Livonia, Michigan. Tell me a little bit about what that involves.
Sure. So Roush is our partner in the contract manufacturing. Their job is to build the vehicle, manage the parts, and give us an in-the-line quality product. We have people here that support that, but it's all up to Roush. That's why we partnered with them. So there's about 40 to 50 people on the program from Roush side. And then on the Bollinger side, in entirety, we have about 150 people.
And most of those, of course, are engineers. They're people who are obviously working here alongside some of the assemblers and that sort of thing. You're early in this. It's only been 6 weeks or so, I think, since you started.
So September 20th. Yep.
So a couple vehicles a day, but you know, the idea, I think you've told me, is next year 2,500 on a single shift. This facility presumably can handle that?
Yeah, so we designed the facility with Roush's support and some of our outside suppliers to do that. You know, flexibility for up-down volumes, but also on a single shift, 2,500, 2 shifts, about 5,000. And we also left areas in the line to grow even more if the volumes increase, so we don't have to move or redo everything.
Well, your Class 4 area isn't overloaded, but it does have one rather large company that is Rizon, backed by Daimler Truck, as your principal competitor. They can bring vehicles in from Japan, which they do. You're going to build them here. How much of that competition is really there in market? I mean,
We're the biggest thing. We both came out about the same time, so we're out there now. So competitively, we have the advantage of having product out there. It's there's only not too many other players in the market, so it's up to both of us to try and challenge each other and get those volumes.
In relatively short order, Bollinger has secured, dealer support on the West Coast from Tech and a few others that you could probably name for me. But the idea being that you've got a place to get the vehicles to get them retailed or wholesaled out, I guess.
Yes, we do. We now have 35 dealers locations that we're working with. I think it's 7 dealer principals in general. And then they also have service locations too, which is a key part, be able to service and warranty the vehicles too.
Right. And it's interesting too, because 5-7 years ago, Bollinger was going to do pickup trucks. That was
right.
That was what its thinking was, Class 3 trucks. And then there was a shift. There was a shift to this, and you've been mostly acquired, not 100%, but 60% by Mullen. You've got a lot of autonomy, as I understand it.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. In terms of how you do this.
Yeah, we do. So Mullen invested in us 2 years ago, They have similar products, but we do work together. We share some resources, some suppliers. But as far as design, manufacturing, engineering, purchasing, we're independent. We make our own decisions. And again, that's the whole group that we put together now for the last 3 years.
This seems to be a space where, from a financial perspective, companies, especially with incentives, can get there to parity pretty quickly with gas or diesel.
Right, right. They can. And that's where we were in class 3. You know, we looked at class 7 and 8, well, all 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and we decided to just keep it 4, 5, and 6 in 2020 because that market didn't have much EV technology support in it, and there wasn't much competition either. So, you know, it's been a few years, and there's a couple of people coming into play right now with that, but the market still from EV commercial trucks, there's still not that many people out there producing them.
Yeah. Do you see now we're coming into a bit of a change, obviously politically, with an administration that hasn't expressed a ton of support for electric vehicles on the passenger car side. This is different. This is commercial trucks. Do you think you're pretty much going to be left alone? Obviously, the incentives. I think you got New York and California on board now for pretty healthy incentives.
Yeah.
That will remain a state matter. Do you have anything to be concerned about from the federal side as far as this kind of financial support that these vehicles need?
Right. Yeah. To your point, the state side, yes, we're confident in that, and those are actually very lucrative incentives. Federal wise, yeah, I think even if things do change, it'll be a couple of years, so that should give us some momentum to get going and get our part of it. Our volumes are low, so our price point is high in our bill of material. So with more volume, we'll be able to get the price down and have a more competitive price to help the buyers with that too.
Well, and
where the incentives don't come in as hard.
Sure, I always get into some level of financial discussion. Let's just say you can get to single shift 2,500 vehicles next year. Does that get your gross margin positive? Is that
next year that would put us in a good spot.
Yeah. And as far as what you need right now, you've got the support presumably from Mullen and others to do what we're doing here.
Yep. Yeah, we're here. Everything we have we've worked hard for, and that's the direction we're in. Now we're in production.
Yeah.
Now we just have to deliver.
Okay, so if by the end of the year, if you're 2 vehicles a day now, what do you see by the end of the year?
Couple hundred. Again, we're trying to go slow. We're adjusting the line, balancing the line. There's some equipment we're moving around, like you saw. Most of it's manual, so we have to make sure we don't spend too much time on the labor and that for the cost standpoint. But we'll improve everything. We're doing training, but by the end of the year, a couple hundred under our belt, and then we're confident. Then we can start the volume production.
Let's begin to scale, which is really where that's how a business is made, right?
Yes.
It isn't just having a cool looking operation
under
a roof. What are you hearing so far? Now I realize you've had some deliveries. You probably did a number of tests in the field with the vehicle. What are you hearing from end users? Is there much in yet?
No, because there's only just a handful out there. But from our ride and drives, we have them going across the country weekly. And competitively, we've actually had some customer ride and drives say they prefer our vehicle better over another competitor. So that was nice to hear. That was just a couple weeks ago. So the ride and drives are really helpful. We're doing demos with the dealers, selling them a vehicle so they have one on site.
Right.
So they're, like I said, we do ride and drives almost every day.
Mm-hmm. You don't have a lot of automation in a contract shop like this, but this is probably as close to it as you get. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, so behind us is battery decking. So we actually install the packs from below, just like you would do in service. They come out the bottom. But yeah, this is the extent of it. We kept it fairly manual for the first year or two to make sure we're doing things right and not spend too much money on automation. And at these volumes too, you don't really need any robots or high automation.
Right. This particular portion is one of the highlights, I guess, really of the assembly, though, because you're getting your 2 battery packs together, which we'll see in a moment how this helps with the upfitting. Is that right?
Yes. So yeah, the packs are completely flat to the top. They also can come out the bottom for service, like I said, but O&E is our battery supplier. We work with them. Center of gravity is lower also because the 2 packs are underneath the height of the frame. So from a drivability standpoint, that's a key factor.
Did you consider doing a different battery chemistry?
Oh yeah, we went through a couple early on. We went through a couple different battery chemistries, designs. The thing we liked about O&E was this off-the-shelf pack. Technically, LFP, the price was not too bad. So from a kilowatt-hour price, it's actually pretty competitive, and the technology's there, and it works very well. So it's a great pack. We're happy to be working with O&E, and we look forward to a future with them.
Okay. Bryan, I guess as I'm looking at this is a pretty smooth surface. Is this easing the opportunity for putting, top hats or, different configurations on this vehicle?
Yeah, and that's exactly what our plan was with this. As you can see, down through the bottom underneath the rails, we left openings for the upfitters to get all their hardware through and their U-bolts. But as far as box trucks, refrigerator boxes, contractor boxes, bucket trucks, contractor beds, flat beds, you can put any configuration on here. And actually, with the cab over, you get an extra 2 feet of space. So that, to a conventional cab, it would have been 2 feet back. So they're able to put bigger boxes on, move the weight more forward on the front axle. So that was a big part of the development.
Now, this frame is going to be used for 5 and 6, class 5 and 6 trucks as well.
This frame will be used for 5. 6 will be a different, bigger frame.
Okay.
Just because of the payload.
So you're already thinking about sort of, I guess, just simply put, bigger boxes for this or bigger uses. The competition is showing a garbage truck. Is that something that you could do if you wanted to?
Yeah, definitely. We're starting to talk to those people also, street sweepers too. Their configurations are a little bit different, but we were just at the NTA show in Ohio in October, and it's an upfit seminars that we had a benchmarking session and had a lot of people come and discuss that with us.
Bryan, you said you've got about 80 VIN numbers now. You've made about 80 trucks. These trucks actually look pretty sturdy, behind us. What kind of numbers? What are the numbers on these things?
Sure. Yeah, so these are class 4, which is 15,500, 15,900 payload. The payload capacity with our trucks is 7,200 pounds. So the upfitters can put on box, bed, bucket truck, whatever that is, up to 7,200 pounds. So it's pretty good rating. And the boxes weigh a couple thousand pounds, 2,000 to 3,000 pounds.
Does that come off that total weight then? Or
yeah, it would come off.
Okay,
yeah. So when they leave here, the capacity is 7,200 pounds.
Okay, so 7,200 pounds. What are our best use cases? Is that, I think you indicated that maybe 80 to 120 miles on a route.
Yeah.
Level 2 charging at night mostly.
Yeah. It's the day runs, not too many overnight runs, but they can charge. 80 miles seems to be the sweet spot for a lot of the people that we deal with. The municipalities, so those are one of our big customers. So they go out for the day, they might do 10 miles. So they wouldn't have to charge for a week. Right. So at 180 miles range, that's actually pretty good for them. So. Yeah, but once they put the upfits on back to that, then it's whatever that payload is. A lot of them, the weight, usually box, dry goods, things like that. Like you said, we're talking to some street sweeper, refuse truck, those kind of things. Those are starting to come into play too. Most of them already do have the charging. Like we talked, the level 2 charging is pretty standard. We can DC fast charge, takes an hour and a half to fast charge, so most of the fleets have to put those in still, or they're installing those as we speak. But we have charging companies that we partner with. We can recommend to them all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're not going to get in the charging business, but you do have people with handshake kind of agreements and direct them. And really, the behind the fence charging, which I'm sure 90, 100% of all this, they're not relying on public charging. Wouldn't really need a top off hardly ever, if ever. Right?
Yeah, maybe one random stop, but most of them go back to the depot.
Yeah, and so when that happens, and they're probably used kind of single shift, single run opportunity. Yeah. So when we look at these trucks, we've got a cab over design, which is interesting because that's something that from I guess you really have to get up into your class 6 and above to start seeing conventional look. But are we looking at any kind of drawback from an aerodynamic standpoint, having the
Yeah, it does have a little. There's a trade-off. You get more capacity,
right?
but aerodynamically, it's not as good as a conventional.
Yeah,
But also with the conventional, you lose the 2 feet. There's a lot of wasted space. You don't
sure,
really need an engine compartment anymore.
right.
So we offer a fairing. It helps with the boxes. That does help. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's square, so it's not the best aerodynamic thing there is. But they're
I'll avoid
EV.
the word brick,
Yeah,
okay?
yeah,
I'll
yeah,
stay out of
yeah.
that. I want to ask you a little bit about your supplier network. I think you said 73% domestic content. Well, we've looked at the cabs. We know, for example, that those are coming in from Shanghai or somewhere SAISC makes those. I think you've got some components from Brazil, but by and large, this is mostly North American content, right?
Yes. Yeah. NAFTA in North America, we get our harnesses out of Mexico. Brazil is our frame rails with Metalsa. O&E is actually here in Novi, so that's simple. Cabs, China. What else? Chargers, those are from overseas. Dana is out of Kentucky.
Mhm.
So we're dealing with 5 to 10 of the top tier ones commercial suppliers already.
When we think about electric trucks and we think about going into market as you are now, what is the feeling in terms of as you step up? I know we've talked about 2,500 trucks single shift next year, but you don't go from 2 a day to 2,500 without some
No,
stops.
right. No, yeah. There's going to be some stops and starts, but again, that's our plan with this model. It's fairly, there's only a couple options, so it's very simple to build. It's just a matter of getting the plant up and running and running at capacity, really.
Yeah. Class 5, which follows this and does use the same frame, right? Next year?
Yeah, mid next year we'll be releasing our B5. It'll be available in production. It's 90% the same content, just for payload, springs, steering, things like that are different. But we're working on that right now, so that's to come out for 2026.
Eventually you want to get to class 6, but there's a lot of interesting competition there from sort of your traditional OEMs. I mean, you've got International, you've got Mac,
Right.
specifically, they come to mind as already sort of being there.
Yeah.
That's something probably a little farther down the road for you.
Yeah, that's probably the year after that. Again, and that'll be a different design completely because air brakes come into play, a lot more things, more payload. So different frame, probably the same axles,
Yeah.
same battery packs, still same. And that's always been our goal, try and keep it common and simple.
Right.
Even the same cab too. We're working in that right now. So they're not too much of a difference, but not completely different.
Well, and the simple math says the more of one thing that you can make,
Yes.
the lower the price
Yes.
comes
Yeah,
down
and that's
to.
where it comes in.
We should talk for just a minute about the incentives. You've announced a couple of additions, Bollinger's additions to both HVIP in California, and then I don't know if it's NYSERDA or who it is in New York.
New York, yep.
But there's $100,000 on them. How important are incentives now versus say a few years from now? Do we still need incentive support after a while?
They're nice. They are good incentives. Yeah, and again, I think with the change of administration, I think it's going to take a while for some of that to settle down at the federal level. But the state level, they seem to be still going forward very strongly, and they're pretty high incentives just on their own at the state level.
Right.
So yeah, it does. It's helpful for us.
Yeah, yeah. You've got a good start on a dealer network. You've got a 7, I think you said, basically companies that you're working with that
Right.
will feed those dealers. How much more of that do you need?
We'll probably double that by next year. I think that's our goal, to have about 70 locations. We're at 35 right now. So depending on the dealer network, it's more family dealerships, than to deal with the fleets. So probably double it. Again, we need footprint out there. So
Right.
that's where that comes from.
Well, and volume is how you end up
Right.
making money anyway. There have been a number of companies that have come and gone in this space. Some that are kind of barely hanging on. Maybe they're more in the upfit space than you are in terms of building a vehicle. How do you see the landscape or the competitive landscape for what you're doing right now? You think about Rizon, obviously,
Right.
but over time you'll be in the hunt against a lot of other companies that have made it.
Yeah, no, and we've wondered and worried about that, but the big OEMs haven't really seemed to have embraced this 4, 5, 6 market, which is why that's where we focused on. And we've actually talked to them, trying to partner or work together, do different things. So I think, again, with the evolution of EVs and the acceptance, in 2, 3 years, there'll probably be a lot more competition. Yeah, I do agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. Bryan, thanks so much for being part
Sure.
of Truck Tech this week. Really
Great.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Alan.
You know, it's really interesting when you get a chance, obviously, to come in someone's plant, see what they're doing. In this case, it's contract manufacturer. But the last time we saw the Bollinger product was actually at the Work Truck Show back in March of this year. Now we see it in production. Now you see the actual nameplate on the truck. You see that this is for real. Here's a company that, while it's pretty small and low production right now, the potential is there with a dealer network and with distributors to really reach some of the goals that Bollinger has. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for watching.